Every comic is someone's first is one of the most iconic quotes in the comic book industry. It's a reminder for comic book creators to always work hard and put their all into every issue or graphic novel they make, because every single issue they make could be someone's first impression of the comic book world. No matter how long we've been into comics, we all started somewhere. Some comic book fans begin their journey with the first issue of a new superhero or indie series. Others start with a trade paperback of an iconic miniseries, a masterfully made graphic novel, or a beloved comic strip in a newspaper. There are also many ways we could have gotten into comics. Maybe it was your dad's pastime that was passed on to you, or a hobby that your passionate friend insisted you take a nosedive into. Maybe you were a fan of the superhero genre or anime and you got into the art form because of your own curiosity and interest. Whatever way you got to read your first comic, you probably treated it as just a normal day in your life. But in reality, that day was the start of a hobby that would mean more to you than you would have ever imagined. So much so that you're watching an obscure YouTuber with less than 500 subs talking about it. I can't speak for you guys and what your experience was like getting into the hobby, so feel free to leave your stories in the comments. But I can speak for myself. My name is Joshua C. I'm turning 20 this year, even though I know I look way younger than that, and I have been actively reading comics since 2016. I have been a fan of superheroes since I was a kid, especially Spider-Man when I was younger. And I guess my first comics would be the strips on random newspapers and a collection of the first Spider-Man clone saga. But the one that gave me a taste of what comics could be is Jason Aaron and Adam Kubert's astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine. It wasn't just their comic I immediately bought, read, and loved one day, but how I ended up being captured by this comic is a really embarrassing story. My uncle bought me this comic when he visited a bookstore, and I remember my mom telling me to be really thankful for it because the amount spent on it is not cheap for a nephew's random request. But even though I was very grateful for it, I did not read it for 2 to 3 years because of something so incredibly stupid. Peter Parker was shirtless, hairy, and hashtag not my Spider-Man. The in-comic reason for this was because both Spider-Man and Wolverine were stuck in the distant past, anticipating and trying to avoid the meteor that destroyed the dinosaurs. For some reason, reading the first few pages turned me off because I was a dumb 9-year-old who wanted the Spider-Man I knew, even though this was the mainline Spider-Man that we all are supposed to be familiar with. Thankfully, after a very rare and stupid fight with a sibling around 2 years later, I'm guessing, I locked myself in my family's bedroom and had nothing else to do besides read this. And I absolutely gobbled it up. Rereading Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine, I can honestly say that for my first comic, it was a genuinely amazing choice. The art by Adam Kubert is solid, featuring so many odd characters and genuinely unique settings drawn with imaginative detail. There's even an ambitious triple-page spread which is implemented in such a cool fashion that to this day I cannot help but marvel at the sight of it. In the comic, we see Peter and Logan being pulled across space and time as they face multiple world-ending events and try to figure out who is responsible for the mess they're in. But beyond it being a fun team-up book that saw two iconic heroes journey across time to find out what the heck was happening to them, it's a story about two people who hate each other, learning to find value and joy in one another over the course of endless obstacles, hardships, and struggles. Looking back now, the emotional through line which makes the comic so special mirrors relationships with a lot of siblings in real life. It usually starts with rivalry and tension as kids, but as you grow older and mature, you learn to adjust and appreciate one another for each other's unique traits and quirks, because you realize that in this world, there's not many people who will relate to you as much as your siblings do. Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine by Jason Aaron and Adam Kubert is not known to be among the most profound and important works in the art world. But at that moment when I first read it, it might as well have been. It was more than just my first comic, more than just words and pictures on expensive glossy paper that kept me entertained. It was comfort in a time of distress, however stupid and nonsensical the cause of it was. It was formative and showed me a glimpse of the wondrous world that superhero comics had to offer. A world that still captures and entangles me in its wonder, excitement, and beauty to this day. It might feel a bit pretentious for me to say this, but the cover to this trade is etched in my memory, and I can't help but feel a sense of nostalgia and gratefulness when looking at it. We all have these moments once in a while when it comes to our journey with art. Key instances where art transcends entertainment. Oftentimes, art and entertainment can be used interchangeably. We play a good game, watch a fun film, read a creatively made comic, and it gives us enough satisfaction and dopamine to entertain us for the moment. It then goes on a mountain pile of media that we will remember and appreciate for a while, but ultimately forget over time. But on extremely rare occasions, we come across art that genuinely surprises and impacts us, that tugs at our heartstrings, expands our understanding, and leaves an impression to last a lifetime. When art transcends entertainment, it is the best thing ever. One way that art can be more than entertainment to us is if it's a transformative piece of work in our eyes. Art that executes something in a way that we've never experienced before, thus adding and expanding to what we know is possible. In 2021, I played 3 games that are categorically similar. Third-person action games with a grand narrative, side quests, and an open world. The games in question are Assassin's Creed Origins, The Witcher 3, and Yakuza 0. To my surprise, the video game that astounded me the most among the 3 titles was the one that I purchased, immediately refunded, and at the end of the winter sale, decided to purchase again because of how cheap and positively viewed the title was. That decision would turn out to be the right one, as Yakuza 0 would be one of the best video games I had ever played until that point, and is still one of the best video games I've ever played to this day. Yakuza 0 was on another plane of existence to me after its credits rolled. It wasn't just a good game, but it's a piece of art that showed me what video games alone could achieve. If you don't know, Yakuza 0 features Kiryu Kazuma, the upright and moral protagonist of the Yakuza franchise in his early years as a gangster in late 80s Japan, who gets accused of murdering a man. The game's dramatic story is one that involves criminal families fighting over a piece of real estate, causing chaos as a result. It's a thrilling, complex, and emotional roller coaster that I cannot encapsulate in a video like this one. The combat is also amazing, with the 2 characters you play as having multiple fighting styles you can choose from in order to beat up hordes of enemies and powerful bosses that come your way. What Yakuza 0 and the rest of the franchise is most well known for, though, isn't the story or combat, despite their astounding quality. It's known for how odd the side activities are. I remember fishing and managing a cabaret club using Majima, the other character you play in the game. There are karaoke cutscenes in this franchise, which are downright iconic in the gaming landscape. And there's a ton of side quests that are so bonkers they feel like they belong in a different game. These casual, quirky, and fun side activities might seem like they lessen and detract from the weight of the main story, which is probably what would happen if this tone shift were present in a movie or show. But this is a game, and the interactive and immersive nature of video games makes the dark story and the light side activities complement each other rather than detract from one another. Because video games like these take much longer to finish compared to other story-driven media, it's so easy for things to get boring and stale. But having the tone of the side quests and main story being so different from one another makes the game constantly engaging. When I'm tense or desensitized by the dark, drab, or dramatic story, I can do the side stuff and be entertained by just how silly and light it is. And when I go back and continue the main story, it feels so impactful and weighty because Kiryu just came from defending Michael Jackson from zombies for a music video directed by Steven Spielberg. Until playing Yakuza 0, I didn't know that video games could pull off mixing such tonally different elements in such a brilliant and masterful fashion. Playing this game really changed what I thought was possible in the world of video games and made me appreciate the medium so much more. Frank Miller's Sin City, which I wrote a paragraph about in my previous video, was also pretty transformative to me because it showed what was possible only with a monochrome color scheme. He used minimalism to the fullest by using negative space to show how determined and focused the main character was in his mission, and it made for some genuinely striking pages and panels as well. It proved to my color-loving eyes that sometimes a lack of color can enhance a story's visual flair and identity, instead of the hindrance that I usually see it as. The popular RPG Disco Elysium, as well as animated films like Loving Vincent, Song of the Sea, and Tale of Princess Kaguya are examples of art that felt like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And it's absolutely wondrous when I come across a piece of art that does something I'd never witnessed before up to that point. But not all our favorite pieces of media are revolutionary, mind-blowing masterpieces that change the way we view art forever. They just find themselves to be on our lists of favorites because they're just well executed and match our tastes. An example of this for me is the animated sitcom Bob's Burgers, which I only started watching a few months ago. I don't know if I would regard any episode to be a revolutionary or transformative piece of animation, but I think it's one of the most consistently good animated sitcoms out there. I appreciate how the comedy doesn't come from looking down on and insulting people for who they are, and how the show doesn't feature a main family that's abusive and violent toward one another. Instead, despite their differences in quirks and arguments and fights, the Belchers are ultimately a family that loves and cares for each other. Each character is nuanced, multifaceted, and strays away from the usual stereotype. Zeke is a rowdy boy from most likely an impoverished home, and he's the type that would usually be a shallow bully in other media. But in Bob's Burgers, we don't only see his rough side, we see his surprising skill and potential as a chef, along with his kindness toward his best friend Jimmy Jr., despite the fact that Zeke's crush, Tina, likes him. Mr. Fishoder, Bob's landlord, is more complicated than just a greedy scumbag, although he is that. I don't know if I'd call him a good person, since he doesn't care about the safety of the rides in his amusement park and almost let his super weird brother kill him and Bob. But despite his shortcomings and quirks, he is nicer and kinder to Bob than a lot of other characters in the show, not even evicting the Belchers despite always being delayed in paying rent. He even gives jobs to criminals in his amusement park, allowing for them to have a second chance despite their shady history. A lot of the characters in Bob's Burgers are like this. They're not perfect, have flaws and quirks that make them entertaining and comedic, but I don't think the show ever looks down on any character. no matter who they are. Bob's Burgers isn't the first time I've seen complex and nuanced characters, but in the genre of animated sitcoms where shock value, violence, and vitriol reign supreme, seeing a funny show filled with flawed but ultimately wholesome individuals for the most part is proof that you don't have to make fun of others to be comedic.
I was just about to ask you on a romantic date.
Bull feces!
Okay, Jimmy Jr., if I agreed to go on a date with you, where would you take me?
To the drugstore.
Zeke, can you do better than the drugstore?
Do what?
Do better than the drugstore!
Tacos. Then to the touch tank, to the aquarium, check out the octopuses. All sorts of good stuff, girl.
Jimmy Jr., your move. Just so you guys know, I'm not enjoying this. It's very stressful. But let's keep going.
A lot of great experiences with comics land in this category for me of just being really, really solid pieces of art. I love it when I read something so good and engaging, I'm engrossed and engulfed in the narrative it weaves. A lot of these comics I've made videos about, like Unbelievable Gwenpool by Christopher Hastings and Gurihiru, Superman's Secret Identity by Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen, and the Thanos series written by Jeff Lemire and Donny Cates with art by Mike Deodato, German Peralta, and Jeffrey Shaw. But beyond the ones I've made videos about, I absolutely adored Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chiang's Paper Girls, Darwin Cook's Parker, Dan Slott and Mike Allred's Silver Surfer, Guillaume March's Carmen, and a ton more. They may be revolutionary and have contributed to the medium in some way, but I think I'd regard them more as spectacular stories that I hold near and dear to my heart rather than eye-opening pieces of art that changed the way I view comics forever. But sometimes what makes a piece of media special is not just its qualities. Occasionally, art resonates with us because of its connection to ourselves and the world around us. Maybe a piece of art has stuck with you not just because it's good, but because it was an obsession of your relative who just passed away. Maybe you've clung on to a piece of media because it reminds you of a joyful time in the more peaceful past. Maybe an emotional scene from a comic resonated with you, not just because of its excellent execution, but because it related to your specific situation during the time you read it, or helped you during a time when you needed it most. I know that a lot of depressed people found comfort in this iconic page from Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman, of Superman comforting and embracing a girl who is about to jump off a building. And this page is one that has literally saved people's lives. I don't know if most people have encountered art that has literally saved their life, but I think most of us have been touched or moved by art on rare occasion. Personally, I've been very lucky and grateful to have a very solid support system around me, so I'm not too sad, at least not yet. But I did have a moment of extreme vulnerability last year when I read The Death of Captain Marvel by Jim Starlin. This was during a time when I was torn with existential dread at death's inevitability, and it made me feel less alone and genuinely grateful for the life that I have. I don't know if it's my favorite comic of all time, but just reading a comic that tackled themes and preached messages I needed to hear at that exact moment genuinely helped me with what I was going through. It was the first time that a comic made me cry, not just because of the story inside it, but because of what it made me think about beyond it. It's impressive when art hits us and pierces through our hard hearts, creating sweet and tender moments of emotion. And I think it's a testament to just how powerful art can be in our lives. All in all, I really enjoyed writing this video and looking back on some pieces of art that have meant a lot to me over the past few years, even the ones that I didn't include in the video for my sanity's sake when editing. I think these profound and memorable experiences with creative, inventive, or emotional art Or why continue to excitedly engage with art? Not just to have a good laugh and be satisfied for a time, but to find the artistic masterpieces that would inspire, enthrall, and enchant me. To find something so powerful it moves me to tears. To experience something so resonant it sticks with me for years to come, and I look back on it with nostalgia and sweetness. This video and topic might be cringe, and I'm sure I will always look back on this with embarrassment. But that's what it feels like, talking about art that you dearly love. It will feel pretentious and exaggerated to a lot of people, but when you're face to face with art that touches the depths of your soul and whisks you away into a wondrous world, it is a magical, intimate experience that you shouldn't let anyone take away from you. In that moment, it is everything. My name is Joshua C, and I will see you in the next comic book video.